Today I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues Olivia and Maddie, helping with tech support. Um, and it's my pleasure and honor to host this first Monday lecture tonight. Pendle Hill is located on Monopoly land of what is now known as Wallingford, PA. As many of you know, since 1930, Pendle Hill has been an experiment in spiritual learning. Hello to our leaders, to our alumni, to those who are new to us tonight, to our residents, to our local friends. Hello to the Studio Spring students as well. Hello to everyone on Zoom. Thank you all, every one of you, for being here with us tonight. Before I say a little bit more about our program tonight, I wanted to give an overview of a few brief tech aspects. I'm joined tonight by Pendle Hill staff and guests, Maddie, Olivia, as well as Francis, working to register folks outside the bar. If you have any type of technical difficulties or questions tonight, please message tech support in Zoom, and they'll do their best to support you. A few other notes on our tech. You may have noticed that we are live streaming this video to our YouTube channel, Pendle Hill USA. Only those speaking will be live streamed. In the coming days, we will send out a link to the recording along with resources from tonight. We've enabled live transcription, so you are able to access closed captioning. And at the end of this lecture, there will be an opportunity to share time for Q&A. So if you're on Zoom, that same account, tech support, you can message throughout the show with Q&A. And then for our audience in the barn tonight, we have note cards where, as questions arise, we encourage you to jot down any of those questions. We're especially grateful to the Friends Foundation for Aging, whose support to Pendle Hill allows us to continue our first Monday lecture series and other online offerings, free to friends of all ages. This first Monday lecture, friends, celebrates 5 seasons of The Seed, our Pendle Hill podcast for radical hope. The Seed is a beloved part of the Pendle Hill universe, and it was a personal joy for me during my QVS year to assist our team, Peterson, our producer, and Dwight, our host, with the production of season 5. So I'm delighted now to introduce our 2 speakers for tonight. Dwight Dunston, aka Duns, is the host of The Seed. He is a West Philly-based facilitator, hip-hop artist, educator, and activist with roots in the Carolinas and deeper roots in West Africa. His passions and gifts include supporting folks to tap into their superpowers and supporting communities to develop the tools, skills, and techniques to stay connected across different identities. Then we have Peter Toscano, who is The Seed's producer. He's a Quaker performance artist, activist, and podcaster based in rural Pennsylvania. He brings humor, curiosity, and deep storytelling to his work, weaving together climate justice, faith, and social change. In addition to producing The Seed, Conversations for Radical Hope, he co-hosts the Quakers Today podcast and is a member of Mill Friends Meeting, part of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. We'll now settle back into centering silence together, and I'll invite Dwight to break the silence when they feel led to begin our show tonight. Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Seeds host, Dwight Dunston, give a Monday lecture alongside Peterson Toscano, the Seeds producer, about The Seed, which is a podcast here at Pendle Hill, where Quakers and other seekers come together to explore visions of the world that is growing up through the cracks of our broken systems. In this Monday lecture, you will be invited to listen, to share, to time travel, to settle into worship, to be present to that still small voice. These will be the invitations. In this Monday lecture, you may find yourself experiencing joy, affirmation, belonging, challenge, laughter, tears, confusion. You may find yourself in touch with your creativity, your imagination. You may find yourself dipping into the streams of your deepest hopes, or sitting outside the cave of your greatest worries. Breath will be important tonight. The inward breath, the outward breath, along with the simple act of noticing that we are not alone. And because these two things are key pillars of rooting in radical hope, they feel important to do in an evening talking about a podcast on radical hope. And so I want to invite us all to take a breath in and out, and to take another breath in and out, and to remember that those breaths are free. And in regards to noticing that we are not alone, I want to invite folks online to drop into the chat your response to one of my favorite questions to ask on the podcast, which is, what is it like being you today? And for folks on site here in the barn, to turn to somebody close to you, and you'll just have about 2 minutes to do this, but to share a little bit about what it's like being you today. So online, you're dropping into the chat what it's like to be you today. And on site, you're turning to someone, sharing your mood.
And I learned so I'm trying
We'll take one more minute for folks online to drop something into the chat, for folks at the barn to check in with one another. 1 more minute. So I invite you to finish up that last thought in the chat, finish up that last thought on site. And thank you for taking the time to be connected to one another. We can go to the next slide. Tonight will be a presentation in 3 parts. We'll begin by looking back at season 5 and some of the previous seasons even before that, reflecting on the guests, their messages, their experiences. We'll then move into a bit of an art share from Peterson Toscano and I, a chance to bring you into our worlds and lives outside of our podcasting here at Pendle Hill, and bring you into the ways that we cultivate hope in our artfulness out in the world. We'll then finish up with looking ahead to season 6 of The Seed, which we're so excited to get started, and share a little bit about the theme of season 6, and also invite in some questions and reflections at that time. Just to remind you, season 5 of The Seed was about world building. We focused on the fact that it is easy to point out all that is wrong today. But what is the world we long to see and inhabit? What models from the past inspire us as we consider new ways of organizing society in the future? What creative visions of community motivate us to co-create future systems filled with values of cooperation, reciprocity, and love? And how can we begin to live in that new reality right now? With that, I want to invite up Peterson for a bit of a conversation.
You want to have a seat over there?
Yeah.
And I'll set it up. Hi, everyone. My name is Peterson. It's so great to see old friends. Peter Blood, good to see you. It's been a long time. I think Liz and Petra are online. I've had all these like wonderful people. Like if you could see online, folks, the collection here of Quakerness, it's really quite lovely. I am the producer of the show, and I like to think of myself as an incredibly humble behind the scenes person when really I'm a tyrant. And I have high demands. But doing a show like this is so lovely because it's a collaborative process. Lucas has been incredible. This past season, we introduced something new, mini episodes, because most of the episodes are about 45 minutes to an hour. Not everyone has that kind of time. So we decided that every other episode would be a mini episode, which could be audio from an event like this, which we've done. It could be reading from a Pendle Hill pamphlet, it could be something from a previous season, or sometimes we'll have such a rich conversation, it doesn't fit in one episode. So we'll have a little bit of that will come up in another one. But Dwight is always the one doing the interviewing. So tonight I'm going to interview him about season 5 and previous seasons. And Dwight, you've mentioned before to me that like themes come up for you that are not part of the regular themes, but they emerge because you're talking to these thought leaders, you're having very deep conversations. And 3 areas come up for you of lessons and messages of grief, joyful collaboration, and miracles, or the unexplainable. So I'm wondering, for each of those categories, could you give an example or maybe 2 of like where did joyful collaboration come from in this past season or previous seasons?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Peterson. The season, the most recent season, season 5, we had the chance, and I feel like your leadership and vision, Peterson, was so much a part of us thinking about not only different kinds of guests, but guests that actually come from different contexts and parts of the world. So the episode that comes to mind for me about joyful collaboration comes from season 5, and it was when we had the chance to interview Mankan Magan and Shirley Ann, who you introduced me to, 2 folks who live in different parts of Ireland. And if folks here are familiar with the history of Ireland, they lived on sort of different parts of a struggle, a conflict, which still is very much resonant in the land and the people there today. But the conversation with both Moncon and Shirley Ann, and the interesting thing about the episode where we had two guests in each of the episodes this season as well. They didn't always, I don't think in any episode they actually spoke to each other. So in both of these cases, both guests talked about their relationship to the natural world in this really beautiful and life-changing way. Moncon talked about communing with the natural world, communing with the herbs and the different plants and the land itself, and the ways that he learned from being on the land and being with the land in this way that felt extremely, and he talked about collaborating with the land and that being a sort of pathway, a sort of opening to his learning and doing that with joy. He talked about doing that joyfully and finding so much time, his time there so enlivening. And Shirley Ann as well, who's a children's book writer, and through her writing and through her own life journey has really reconciled in herself her relationship to the land, her relationship with her father, but talked about creating stories that excite people to connect, to feel a part of the land, to feel the she described it, being a sort of conduit for readers to the land, to place. And so her relationship with place, this collaboration with place, was a vehicle that she wanted to introduce readers to help them not only connect with the land, but also be this catalyst for strengthening their imagination, deepening their sense of hope. And so in both cases, when I think about joyful collaboration, it's not always the place I go to. I think about people and collaborating on podcasts as something has been a joyful collaboration or can be joyful collaboration. But in both of those cases, people talked about their relationship to the land and really communing, collaborating with the land.
And this was a powerful combination of guests because they both came from a different side of the struggle. So Moncon's family was part of the original armed resistance against the English. Like his ancestors used all their money to buy weapons to fight against the English. And Shirley's father came from England with the military and the police to enforce what was going on there. So they grew up in these households that war and military was a huge part of it. Shirley talked about how she thought every day her dad wasn't going to come home and he would get killed in the struggle. And hearing them talk now, after, they've been raised there. This is part of their lives, their heritage. They're so Irish, both of them. It was so powerful to hear. And I love, you'll have to listen to the episode when Magan talks about the Quakers and the view of the Quakers in Ireland. It's kind of like almost like this other being there, like outside of the struggle and the important role that the Quakers had. That was so many unexpected things. And that's part of it. It's like you don't know where the conversation is going to go. You hope it will go somewhere, but this one was magnificent. And though they didn't speak to each other, their messages were just woven together beautifully. So that's an episode very much we encourage you to listen to. And before I became producer, I was assisting, and you had a wonderful producer, Anna Hill, who never had produced before. And so part of my job was to help her learn producing. She had some powerful guests on as well. And you experienced some grief in season 4 and in season 5. Do you want to talk about a story or two where grief came up through the conversations and through the episode and that process?
Mm-hmm. And shout out to Anna Hill, who's here online, and who helped to steward, many seasons of the podcast. And I don't think Ari Goodman is here, but was our first producer. So I've been really blessed to have some incredible collaborators, teammates, grief in season 4 of the podcast. I think about the interview with Rabbi Mordecai Liebling, who is a part of Rabbis for Peace. And when things began to escalate in that part of the world, when genocide in Palestine began to really amplify and come into the world stage in a way that people could no longer ignore. Rabbi Mordecai was a part of a gathering coalition of rabbis all across the country who gathered together and began in not only in an activist way, began to voice and push back against the policies and practices that were a part of catalyzing the genocide that the world saw. But he also really described, and in that episode, really gets in touch with the grief of witnessing those experiences. And to me, that episode, in my own journey of really readying my heart, not just my mind, sort of intellectualizing or intellectually trying to understand what was going on sort of thousands of miles away, but that I could no longer ignore. But to break open my spirit and my heart so that I could, from the grief, from the breaking open, actually root in this deeper sense of love, which is connected to justice, which is connected to community, which is connected to, I think a big part of catalyzing and bringing into fruition this world growing up through the cracks of a broken system where there is no war, where there is no separation of folks, of one another and making enemies of one another. That grief is so much a part of that. And in that episode with Rabbi Mordecai, I remember us being online, and I'm tearful now because there was a moment where
I know where you're going.
where his heart breaks on the episode. It was just it just was that. And there's been a few episodes like that where my heart breaks open. Another episode was with Felix Rosado, who was actually condemned to a life in prison, and was of the very small percentage of folks who had his life sentence commuted. And once he was released, really, even while he was in prison, committed his life, his livelihood to change, to transformative justice, to forgiveness, to accountability. These sort of things that sound cool when we say them, but for me, I think he really took that on and committed his life to that work, not knowing if he would ever be outside of prison, and he was commuted. And in that episode, he talks about himself being free-ish. So not fully free, but free-ish, because until other people that he was in prison with were also free, his full being could never feel the full sense of freedom. And that's another episode where I could feel and hold, and there was actual grief that felt so much a part of the recipe for also helping to bring into the world this future that grows up through the cracks of parts of our broken systems. These things we look at in our society where we're like, we know this isn't working, but how do we move past it? So the grief in those episodes come to mind when I think about grief.
And you're able to have these incredibly deep conversations with folks. You give them space, and you make lots of noises when you interview people. I know, because I have to edit some of them.
Sorry, Peterson, I'm so
and
sorry.
move them. But you're giving them so much. And I remember I was asked to edit the episode with Rabbi Mordecai, And as someone who does editing, you have to listen to the clip over and over and over again, decide what do we keep, what do we not keep, do I have to move something here? And at one point, I just felt so overwhelmed and privileged to be sitting, meditating on this conversation, especially that moment when he said he was in Philadelphia, I believe. He was with a protest with Palestinians, and they asked him to pray a prayer for these dead Palestinians who were killed by Israeli soldiers. And he said, I never in my life imagined I would be asked to do this and have to do this. And yeah, you get these deep, deep conversations. And you know me, I'm all about timekeeping. So I'm going to move this along very quickly because we have a next section to go. But in the time that you've been doing the seed and interviewing people and being this, not just a host of a podcast, but a facilitator of a space, what's one thing that you've learned that like you didn't know when you started, that you now know and it's an important part of what you do?
The first thing that came to mind, some of the conversations I try to keep them to 30 minutes and it never happens. And some get longer, and Peterson's like, that was great. You gotta wrap it up more quickly next time. So they often feel unfinished. Even that Rabbi Mordecai episode felt unfinished. And there's something that happens inside of me when I'm in a conversation and there's just so much to pull from it. And you're so great at the editing you do. Anna was incredible at this, and Ari was incredible at this. And Lucas has started editing more. Lucas is incredible at this because I don't envy any of y'all because you have to cut some things. And I often have this feeling that things are unfinished inside of me. But this thing that I learned, and it feels like a metaphor for life maybe, but there's things that get wrapped up in conversations that have yet to come. So even in the Rabbi Mordecai, which was a season 4 episode, I got to interview Rayam Abulaban Kafri in season 5, who was a voice from Ramallah, Palestine. And it was another one of these powerful conversations that certainly had grief in it, but had this joyful collaboration as well, and had these stories of community coming together. And it felt like it rounded out this conversation that I had, months before. Certainly it feels like it would complement one another, but internally inside of me, there was something that felt complete by having this conversation. So I think one of the things I'm learning is to just be at peace with incompletion, knowing that spirit moves, God moves, and it's all in right timing. That feeling, that sense of completion, that I don't need to have it just because the episode ends or just because the conversation ends. That stirring, that churning means that something else is moving, and I need to just let that be.
And what's challenging for you and for me in the podcasting we do, because I host a bunch of my own podcasts as well as produce others, we're both live performers. And when you're doing a podcast, it is a very lonely thing. Like, you don't see your audience, and we're both performers who we learn from our audiences. So it's an act of faith that somebody is actually listening. I'll look at the stats just to make sure, but we have often no idea who they are and what happens for them with this conversation. Where does it go? And we decided for tonight to have this art section to give a little bit of a showcase of what we have done individually and a new thing we'll be doing together. So I was given the chance to go first. And I have 2 things for you. For those who don't know me, I grew up in a very conservative background and went to evangelical churches. I was a missionary in Zambia and in Ecuador. I'm a Bible scholar. I know the Bible very well. I love the Bible. And a couple of years ago, after I became a Quaker up in Hartford, Connecticut, I was invited to New England Yearly Meeting to do the Bible half-hour lecture. And it was all about like living in the beloved community. I think there were like 8 more words, but like they made it in a committee and they didn't want to leave any word out. But it had something to do with covenant. And the problem with I had a meeting with it is whenever you have a covenant, some people are in and most people are out. That's what a covenant does. And it has a lot of negative connotations. My partner's from South Africa, and there was the Great Covenant where the white Afrikaners said, this is our country. That's their covenant. So it was dicey. So all of my presentations were about outsiders. So Hagar in the story of Abraham, and just a variety of outsiders. And then the last one, it just got progressively stranger too. And the last one I said, okay, it's just gonna get a little weird today. And they're like, today? It's been weird all week. And I said, well, sometimes when you hear the story of Jesus, we hear it so often, particularly in the Christian tradition, we're often told this is what this means. And we don't have a chance to see it with new eyes. And that's what I loved with being with some Quakers at first who didn't know the Bible very well, because they would see something which, is that a cell phone? There's a fact about cell phones, not to embarrass you or shame you. But I learned this actually in New England Yearly Meeting, that did you know, this is true, whenever a cell phone goes off in a Quaker gathering, a fair trade, organic coffee bush withers and dies. Thanks a lot. Thank you, friend. So sometimes you have to kind of insert a new character or look from a different perspective. And there's lots of people who've done this. So I got this idea, what if? It opens up a lot of opportunities. What if someone was born the same night in that same manger who believed she was Jesus's twin sister? And she had very good reason for this, because she too was in this holy womb and she came out and she was imbued with all kinds of powers. And she's the placenta of Jesus. Now, of course, there was a placenta of Jesus, and we don't know what happened to it, but like there's actually all kinds of myths and Catholic traditions of what happened to this. But I said, what if this placenta was alive and had thoughts and feelings and was very angry because after 9 months of this warmth and intimacy in the womb with Jesus and Mary, she's just dropped on the ground. Jesus getting gold, angels, shepherds, she's got dung. She's sitting in dung. And what if she's really angry and she goes off to have her own set of parallel adventures? And the idea to do this is not to in any way take this story and make fun of it, because I take it very seriously. I love Jesus, I love the Bible, but to help us see it in a different perspective, and also to help us see issues that need to be talked about more. Who are the outsiders? And how are women treated in a society that is run by men? So I gave this talk about the afterbirth of Jesus. And it becomes this very tender thing at the end. Somebody said, you should turn this into a graphic novel because it's graphic. And so I got together with a Quaker, Joey Hartman Dow, some of you may know, and we came up with The Amazing Adventures of the Afterbirth of Jesus. And what I love about it is it tells the story of Jesus, and it tells the story of injustice. In fact, I asked Joey when it came time to do the image of Jesus being arrested by the Romans to recreate an image that was very familiar to Americans. And this was when Eric Brown he was arrested and they were choking him and he was saying, I can't breathe because he had asthma and he was in a chokehold. And I said, could you put Jesus in that position? Because he experienced police brutality in a occupied country. So I brought copies for anyone who wants these. I'm not asking for money, but I'm encouraging you to give a donation to Pendle Hill to help with the reconstruction. And very quickly, oh, I don't have time for my other thing. Oh, well, we're gonna move on. That's how it works. We gotta keep going. So we have this excellent thing that we're doing together, which we have never done together in person. We did it once on the phone. And many years ago, I started writing a play that I stopped and I said, I cannot write this play unless I do it in collaboration with someone. All of my plays, I'm a character actor, so I take on many different characters. And so it's usually a one-person show, multiple characters. This is a two-person show, and we're actually playing the same character, but two versions of them. So this is our first reading. We've never done this publicly. No one has ever heard this before. The setting is, think of it's like a desert community. You're at a tent. It's actually the tent of the patriarch Abraham. And it starts with this older white man, I guess that's me, who comes out first to address the audience, who are basically those who are coming to pay tribute to Abraham because he had just died. And so they're coming as mourners. As the desert sun, I need my glasses. I am truly that old white guy. As the desert sun climbed slowly into the sky, casting an orange hue across the horizon, the old faithful servant Eleazar stood in quiet contemplation. He watched the silhouettes of countless travelers, that's you, emerging from the shadows, their figures stark against the glowing morning light. Each traveler was burdened with goods, their camels laden heavily with gifts and tributes meant for Abraham, the revered patriarch and man of God, whom Eleazar had laid to rest just a week prior. As Abraham's household chief steward, Eleazar stood ready to greet the mourners.
But look, another man, a younger man, a darker man is stepping out through the tent flaps.
Excuse me, who are you to interrupt my story? Tell me a story here.
I'm the other narrator. Every story has another narrator.
No, I'm telling this story, not you. And by the way, I narrate it in the past tense, not the present tense. Eleazar turned to the young man, a lowly servant, and said, prepare the feast to honor our Lord and Master Abraham. The young, humble servant bowed low before Eleazar, not only out of custom, but also to demonstrate his love and respect for the man.
Bullshit.
Excuse me?
Your story is bullshit, and you have no business telling it. The younger, darker man spits on the ground at the old white man's feet, his eyes blazing with fury. The younger man says, who do you think you are to speak to me that way, you old crow?
The older man pointed his crooked finger at the younger man. You insolent slave, how dare you speak to me in that way? I am Eleazar, the chief steward of the house of Abraham, God's chosen servant.
The young, darker man tenses his muscles as sweat glistens on his brows in the morning sun, that takes two quick steps, stands nose to nose at the doddering old fool. The hell you are. I am Eleazar, and the old goat Abram robbed me blind.
Security, we need security here right now.
They are not coming. You might as well leave with your tired Sunday school fable and let me tell the reader what really happened. Or are you afraid of the truth?
Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna ignore you, okay? Because you're just looking for attention, and security will be here soon. Security! Eleazar lifted his ornate staff, the one that Abraham gave him when he was just a boy, and too small to hold it for more than a few seconds. Silence! The insolent young servant cowered before the chief steward. The old man's pale face colored with righteous rage. Guards, strong men, come and take this filth away and teach him a lesson.
Children pop their heads out of the tents,
Children? What
jiggling
No
and
children.
pointing at the funny old man. Abram's children and grandchildren.
No, Isaac. Isaac was his only heir and son.
You mean Ishak? Abram cursed him. After Sarai died, Ishak never ever left his tent. He even needed daddy to send the servant to find him a wife. He's an old man now, blind and weak. He has no friends and is afraid of his own shadow. You see that tent there? That is where he's hiding out now. But Ishak is not alone. Abram has other sons. You are leaving out Ishmael, the unchosen son, who Abram tossed into the desert to die with his mother Hagar.
Regardless, they were both adult men with their own families at the time of Abraham's death. So these brats you inserted into your fairy tale must have been the children of servants, or maybe Abraham's grandchildren. That must be it. You need to pay more attention to detail.
And you need to be less selective in who you include and exclude in your fable. After Sarai's death, Abram married Keturah and had 6 sons together. They are Zimran, Joskan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. They are here in Abram's massive compound and have their own stories to tell.
Stop it. You're just complicating this narrative by bringing in minor characters. Keturah was just a concubine. Her children were not important. Abraham gave everything to Isaac, his sole heir, the chosen one. So stick to the primary characters. Better yet, just leave me alone so I can tell the real story.
Abraham's many offspring tumble out of the tent, a giggling, swarming collection of sons, daughters, and grandchildren. They laugh at the old man because he is boring and shriveled up like one of those Sundays hermits who show up from time to time smelling like sheep dung and talking nonsense.
Eleazar was born in Abraham's household, the son of a handmaiden whose husband died in battle when Lot and his family were kidnapped from Sodom. Sadly, Eleazar's mother died when he was a boy. A fever took her away. In his kindness, Abraham brought the child into his tent, raised him like his own son, and designated him as heir to possess all.
Yep. Daddy Abram heaped it on thick. But Sarai was not too happy about the whole situation. I often wondered if she bumped off Eleazar's mother.
That is a bald-faced lie. Sarah loved Eleazar, even as she longed for her own child.
Love? Like when she threw a cow's femur bone at his head when he was asleep?
She saw a rat and was frightened. It was an accident.
Or the time she put a scorpion in his bed?
That was a joke. She was playing. She had a wonderful sense of humor.
And the time she intentionally gave little Eleazar spoiled food to eat, that boy spent 2 days pooping and puking his insides out.
Surely that was an accident.
How about when she slit his favorite goat's throat?
Sarah did that? But how could you know that?
You know it was her. The next day, she refused to give her robe to Marian, the washerwoman, and insisted on washing it herself. Little Eleazar and Sarah emptying the bloody basin of water. That's when I knew she did it. That's when you knew, but didn't want to believe it. Yes, I see that silenced you. Now, let's stop pretending we are telling our own stories. You are Eleazar, a straightforward fairy tale Eleazar without nuance or moral ambiguity. You are the sort of storyteller kings commissioned to praise them while overlooking their wicked acts. I am the rest of the story, the other Eleazar who lives in shadows, swept under rugs, and always underfoot. Don't pout like that. That's what we look like when we are being stubborn. We can agree on one thing. You can admit it. Sarah was a terror to us. You and I have the scars on our bodies to prove it.
All right, I concur. Sarah was never kind to me. She was cold.
And cruel.
Yes, that too. But in her defense, she suffered. She longed to give Abraham an heir.
Well, Abram already had his dear little Eleazar. And Abram made promises to us, so many promises. Promises he never kept. He replaced us, pushed us aside, and demoted us to the life of a servant. Visitors, you who have just arrived to pay your respects to Abram and are licking your chops for all the free food, first you must listen. And I will tell you how Abram and his tricky God stole my birthright. I will also tell you how Abram treated his son, Ishmael. If you don't believe me, talk to Ishmael yourself. See? There. He is that stately old man in the shade of those date trees. And see, he is surrounded by his princely sons, Nebai, Kedar, Abdul, Mizpah, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jator, Naphish, and Kadima, each the head of their own growing tribes. That beautiful woman, radiant, dare I say, sexy even in her old age, that is Hajar, who lived in the Egyptian court until Abram wed her.
Scene. Dwight, you've got something to share.
I do. So, wow, I gotta shake that off. Well, our chair. In the piece of art that I wanted to share to bring in, I brought a song in that I just want to invite us to listen to, and actually want to pull up a slide. If we can go to, I think it's the next slide. Oh no, yeah. This song is called "An Invitation to Rest and Remember That You Are Loved." And as the song plays, I want to invite you to rest and remember you are loved. And to also think about this question that we often ask the guest of the seed in season 5, which is, what is something from your past that you hope will endure in the future? And as we begin to transition into the third part of our evening, which is about looking forward into season 6, which is turning our attention to the future, this invitation to rest, think about our own goodness, think about the love that is all around us, surrounding us, always being poured into us by other human bodies, more than human kin, the natural world. Want to invite you to just think on this question, and as we emerge from the song, we'll have a little bit of time to see what came forward from reflecting on this question. So, without further ado, this is an invitation to rest and remember you are loved.
can't.
So I want to invite folks on Zoom, if something came to you about one thing from your past that you hope will endure in the future. We're gonna do it a little bit differently than we had planned. I'm just invite folks on Zoom to just drop into the chat if something came to mind as you were listening to that song. And for folks in the barn, once again, just gonna invite you to turn to somebody close to you. And we'll just take another 2 or 3 minutes in these pairings to just share a little bit about something from your past that you hope will endure in the future. Then we'll come back and move into our final part together. So online, feel free to drop that in the chat. And on site here, just turn and talk for just a minute or so.
I changed the question a little bit, but not too much. I realized the answer came up for me was something from my cousins, and I hope that they're because this year for me, it's way from I started I came, was very absorbed in undergraduate study in such a way that even though I was fortunate, I really loved it. I was in college, I very rarely feelings, that move. You know, there was a particular the spirits one thought that it has things that felt more immediate, which they more important, but certainly more pressing in person. And I never really made that connection, but I felt for the fifth dimension. And that's a lot of the reason I decided to do yes, right? I wanted to spend a year really actively recovering that part of myself. And I think I'm very grateful in large part because of Pendle Hill. I feel that's really been true. As
We'll take 1 more minute, 1 more minute.
Next year, I wanna maintain and hold on to that. So lesson there, that part of yeah. What
Everything. Why didn't you?
Absolutely.
So we're gonna come back together, friends. And thank you for taking that time. I do just want to read out a few of the responses that we got from our friends online. And I'm not going to share the ones that were sent directly to Pendle Hill because I'm not sure if they wanted to be shared out loud, but some of the things in the chat we have Autumn sharing family names, Ingrid sharing, though I've experienced loss, grief, and violation, I've been still able to trust and love deeply and fully. We have Lynn sharing, taking joy in the natural world. Anna sharing, feeling deeply. Lilia, love for and interconnected with the wilder world. And Reverend Retta shared love, all kinds, expressions, depths, and layers. So, thank you, friends. Just want to share a little bit about season 6, and then we're going to move into some Q&A. How are we doing on time, timekeeper?
Really great.
Okay, great. For season 6 of The Seed, we will focus our attention on love and power. We are looking at love not just as a sentiment, but as a spiritual and communal practice that resists fear, fuels justice, and transforms lives. What does love require of us in the face of injustice, violence, and despair? How can we harness the power of our imaginations to lovingly plant and tend to the seeds of the world we are co-creating? What is God calling you to be faithful to in your acts of love, justice, and power? And where do we already see love and power at work, in seed form or full bloom? Season 16 is inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? In it, he wrote, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. In each episode, we will ground our discussions in a text, which may be a Bible passage or an excerpt from a Pendle Hill pamphlet, or writings from early Quakers or contemporary thought leaders. And we're compiling a list of guests right now. And if there are folks that are on your hearts and minds as you think about the theme of love and power, please feel free to email us at Pendle Hill, podcast at pendlehill.org. We would love to hear from you and excited to get our 6th season started. So that's a little bit about the theme. I'm gonna give this computer back because I know there's some questions coming in, both online and there were some questions on site that folks wrote down to ask. So maybe we can come back up here, Peterson. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a
Lucas.
and we got loads of time.
Okay.
We didn't lose them.
Thank you so much, Dwight and Peterson. Had a wonderful time with your art share, all the other parts of this lecture. But yes, for my friends in the bar, please feel free to write questions on those note cards we passed out. Maddie and I will be collecting them up here. For friends on Zoom, you can send them to the Q&A/tech support tech host account, and we'll see them on our laptop. We invite you to share questions that will clarify what you've heard, questions that seek to learn more about something that has been shared. And we hope that this evening will be part of a continuing conversation far beyond the 4 walls of the farm. I'll jump in line while folks are thinking of questions and ask my own. This is a question for both of you. I really love to see all sides of both of your artistic personalities. I've been working on with both of you on the podcast, but I know you have all of these wonderful dimensions, your imaginative, talented, creative practices. And yeah, I guess I'm curious if there are ways you feel that interacts with the seed, especially knowing that both the seed is a podcast about social change in a way, and I saw elements of social change in the performance you just gave. I know the social change is an important part in general with your artistic practices. So I'm curious about how social change matters to you, or how you represent it in your art, and also how that shows up, how your artistic sides show up in your podcast. Thank you.
I often, I love it when friends of mine and family members finally see one of my live performances, because I feel like they don't really know me until they see me perform. And I had the wonderful privilege of watching Dwight perform his one-person show last 2 months ago. And it was so happy because I got to see like his brain and his body work, and I like, okay, now I feel like I can work even closer with you because I know you better, having seen your work. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but as someone I've been doing performance art since 2003, and all of my stuff, I always use comedy around incredibly serious issues. And what I find though is there's this strange tension when you do art around social justice issues, is finding the right balance. Because it's so easy that if you're so focused on the justice, it becomes didactic and preachy, and it's not good art. If I lean too much into the art side, it's beautiful art, but people are unclear of the message. So it's always this tension of part of me being dissatisfied, like, oh, that was such a good message, but artfully, it wasn't like what I wanted. But I think that's where the magic happens, in that place of tension for me. I don't know if it's the same for you, if it's different.
I don't know if my mind goes there at first, and thinking about my arts, the art that I make in social change work. But I love how you framed it, because it does speak to a lot of the art that I've made over the years. Some people know this, but not everybody. I'm a clown. I'm a Quaker clown, and that's right. Give it up for the Quaker clown. Long tradition. Long tradition. Quaker has a long tradition of clowning, in the most beautiful way. And one of the things Francis allowed me to lead a workshop here not too long ago, and I hope to be able to do more, because one of the things that I've learned through clowning that I maybe was aware of in some of my other art forms, but it really clarified when I started this clown journey, was the need to continue to massage my imagination, and specifically towards had to be fueled from a place of hope, because I quickly learned that I can actually I'm sort of a master catastrophizer, and so my imagination can think of worst case scenarios pretty easily. But this practice of, okay, can I actually create or imagine in my mind? Is my creativity rich enough and strong enough to invite in a possibility that feels hopeful in my body? And that's a practice. That feels like a practice. So even when I think about this podcast, I appreciate this question, Lucas, that's talking about radical hope, which is different from right siding or sort of being naive. You know, the Greek that we talked about earlier, that's been a part of really staying hopeful for me, because I think you have to like look out in the world and let your heart break at some of the things we see. But the clown, and I actually think Quakers are also have it's in our sort of DNA to look out in the world, be so heartbroken about what we see, and to choose to try to call into being this other world, this heaven on earth, this beloved community. You know, there's so much of that efforting to bring those things into reality that to me feels fueled by my art. You know, I really try to create that world in my art, and also the social action. Yeah, makes me consider what kind of things I'm saying with my art, so they really go hand in hand.
And Dwight, I have to say, I think you read my mind a little bit, because you started answering one of the audience questions before I had ever asked it. So I'll still ask this one in case there's anything either of you want to add, and I'll ask another one with it that I think is related. This question was, what do you know about radical hope? And how can each of us experience radical hope in this difficult time? So if there's any additional thoughts you have about radical hope, I think we'd all love to hear it. And I'll also ask this because I think it might be related, is how did you choose the name The Seed, and what does the name of the podcast mean to you?
I'll jump in just quickly. maybe not quickly, but Quaker quickly. Nice, nice. Quaker quickly, which is 3.5 times slower than most. I think when I think about this idea of radical hope, I think I saw Reverend Retta online, who was here, who was a guest on our first season, and we talk about this a lot, but I imagine there's like something we believe or that we maybe our essence is trying to move towards that feels like kind of embarrassing to say out loud. You know, it feels like childlike to really hold on to. You know, that to me, there's something I think about radical hope that feels childlike in the ways that children have wisdom. There's so much wisdom that young people have. I don't have any kids of my own, but I've gotten to be around kids and be around loved ones who have children and work with young people. And there's a way where the kind of right and wrong, you can't really explain. Like you have to kind of explain why things are in a way that's like doesn't make like sense to them, you know. And as you explain it, you realize it doesn't make sense to you, but you have to say it, you know, because it is what it is what is. But I think like the step right before that explaining, where the curiosity and the hope and the passion for life and it's all right there on the like right in front of you in this young person. Like I think that's still alive for many of us. It's just that like kind of embarrassing, silly thing we believe about goodness and fairness and rightness, you know, before it gets distorted or gets, you know, made, you know, we become adults and the rightness has just a different tinge to it. It's just like, I'm right, you know, it's like our play. It's like, no, I'm right. No, you know, it's just like has this different tinge. And young people are just like, no, this is right. This is right. And so the radical hope piece in me, or when I think about that term, it's like whatever that thing is that you know in your core that, you know, comes from spirit, from divine love, that where you just know it's right. And before you shut it down because it feels embarrassing to feel that it's right or something, that just needs some like that fire needs stoking a little bit or something. So
I thinking about the moments in my life where, you know, I've seen the impossible happen. If you get old enough, I just turned 60 this year. So if you get old enough, you start seeing things actually happen. When you're younger, you're like, could this ever be? And it's like, oh yeah. So my husband's from South Africa, and he was part of the anti-conscription movement. He was white South African, so he didn't. This was during apartheid, and he was part of the queer liberation movement and the anti-apartheid struggle. And he was talking about how those years, as it was getting closer to the time that Mandela was going to be released, it seemed so far away. It just got more violent, more crazy, more out of control. It just seemed hopeless. And then he said things happened so quickly, it took their breath away. They could not keep up. And I like having that memory in my head. And I have my own memory back in 2003, when I finally came out as gay after 17 years of being in conversion therapy, trying to cure myself and having Jesus fix me, and realizing that all those years I was asking Jesus, make me straight, make me straight. And finally I realized, you know, Jesus was saying, well, you know, you just can't take no for an answer. Like, you never imagined that I would say no, that's not what I want you to ask me. And at that time, conversion therapy was mostly unknown from the public, or it was seen as a joke. Like, oh, these stupid people, they think they can change. And there were funny movies about it and all that, but I knew it was dangerous. That it harmed us emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And I began to tell my story and found other survivors years, and we band together, and it was really at the height of it, there were maybe 20 of us telling our stories in a new format, YouTube. It was brand new, putting it out there. Journalists found out. We began to tell our stories, and through storytelling, believing that our stories were important enough to tell, we shifted the public discourse that today, most people know, oh, conversion therapy, that's dangerous. And there are laws on the books of states that have banned it. And it really comes down to the witness of a handful of people who told their story and were so determined to get it out there. And now I do climate work, and so people ask me all the time, where do you fall on the scale of hope and despair? Do you feel hope? Where's your hope? And I'm like, get me off of that binary. I don't always feel hope, because for me, hope isn't just a feeling, it's an attitude. To me, it's about determination. And that, you know, it becomes radical to imagine a world, not just without fossil fuels, but, you know, to like live in it mentally, to visit it and communicate it to people. And so having some history of seeing what seemed impossible and like seeing the world a new way. And Glenn always said that at the ANC rallies he would attend, and the young people, he was a college student, he said they always had a speaker come up at the end, no matter how hard things were, how difficult things were, but there's somebody's job was to come up and say, this is what the new South Africa is going to be like. And they would paint the picture of what they were fighting for, as opposed to what they were fighting against. And he said that that was so essential that they held on to that, the vision of the world they were longing for, and that they just refused to give that up no matter what came across them. No, where did he come from? That was before my time.
Was it, I'm looking at Francis Kramer, our Director of Education. It was either you or Francisco.
It's you and me and Ariel spent a lot of time thinking together and playing with different options.
Okay, great. It was me and Francis and Ari thinking about it. Coming up with some options, thinking about the garden. We were thinking about the garden here at Pendle Hill.
I think also the Quaker resonances of the seed, another word that friends use to talk about the life within, the seed within, and the resonances with the garden and the possibilities.
Yeah. Yes. I'm glad you didn't go home, Francis. I've been here making history, the revisionist history of the seed. But I can say today, I mean, what's coming to me right now in this moment, I'm just thinking a lot about what I won't be around to see, you know. So I wonder how many people were at those rallies, or how many elders, you know, were in movement. I've studied a lot of, some folks know this, I'm a Kingian nonviolence practitioner, teacher, and there were so many people who died before these laws, you know, got put into place, before there was this huge, you know, seismic shift in American culture. And, you know, they really thought about, and even King, you know, I sometimes watch it just to like, just be under the weight of his propheticness, but also his surrender that he might not get there. His last speech, you know, last big speech, where he literally says, I might not get to the mountaintop with you, but I've been there. I've seen what's coming, you know, and it gives me chills. It makes me cry every time I watch it. So when I'm thinking about the seed and like, what's kind of the thing I can see in my mind's eye, in my heart, that I might not physically get there to, but and all I'm responsible for is helping to water and to nurture and to block, you know, make sure the sun gets to it. You know, what is that issue? What is that justice issue? What is that manifestation of love in public? What is that? What is that thing? So that's how I'm thinking about the seed today.
Thank you both so much for those answers. We always have so many wonderful comments and questions that I just want to uplift. So we had someone in the barn writing in about making the same connection Francis made about early friends' use of the seed language. The seed Christ is over all, and how that's kind of beautiful point of connection. We have a number of friends saying they're very excited about season 6, really looking forward to it online. And then I want to end with one final question, which Amy writes, feeling great gratitude for your work. My question has to do with what we can do for you and expanding the mission of the podcast. Can you mention a few specific ways an individual can help to promote the seed, spread the word, and widen the audience? Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, that is, so thank you, Amy, for that, and for everyone who has been sharing the seed. The thing is, there are so many podcasts out there. In fact, when I first got involved, I didn't like the name The Seed, not because I didn't like the name, but there were so many other podcasts with that same name, and I was like, how are they gonna stand out amongst them all? Because it's competitive, and there are a lot of people who have never listened to a podcast. To this day, I will have people ask me, do I need special equipment? I was like, just your cell phone, that's all you need. And you can find it. So anytime you can share it, you have a sphere of influence of people who know you, who trust you. Listen to an episode that you really like and share it in your social media, tell your friends about it. Sometimes it's great, even listen with friends. What is interesting, a podcast, just like radio, is one of the most intimate forms of communication. Because it's usually one person speaking to another. And Dwight's taking this on in this most recent season, season 5, where he'll talk directly to the listener. And we talk about it as one listener because really you're only talking to one person at a time. And it is very intimate, and it's the kind of thing that you're in a world that you don't often have those opportunities. So lift it up through your social media, talk about it, share it with folks, share it with your meeting, let them know it exists. And I'm also the co-host of Quaker's Today podcast, which, I think they complement each other very well. And just getting the word out that there's Quaker content out there. There's The Quakers, another one. There's lots of great podcasts and things. But if people don't know about it, they'll never listen to it. So share it in resource lists, talk about it. And do you have any other options of how people can get it out there? T-shirts, maybe. Listen to the seed.
Might need t-shirts. Thank you for that question, Amy D. Also donating, that's also a way to help support and keep the podcast alive and thriving. Those, I think you said everything.
Oh, and one other thing, very important. Rate and review the show. Particularly if you listen on Apple Podcasts. This does help us get risen higher in the ratings, and also people are searching. If there are 10 seeds, the one that gets the highest ratings and most reviews will be the one seen first. So not every way you listen you can rate and review, but if that option exists, please rate and review the show. 5 stars we would recommend. And I just want to thank you, Lucas, for all of your help in organizing this, and the folks who are here in the barn, the folks online. Hello, Liz, Petra. There's so many lovely people. I wanted to chat with all of you. This has been great. We're really excited about season 6, especially grounding it in a passage of some sort. And we'll let you know in advance so that you can read that passage and look at it yourself, so that when you come, if you want, you can come prepared for that, or just be surprised.
I'm gonna come around this side. Thank you again so much, Dwight and Peterson. And thank you everyone for joining our experiment in spiritual learning community tonight. The recording of this event and other Pendle Hill offerings will be available on our YouTube channel. You'll also receive an email in the coming week with a link to the transcript, recording, and upcoming opportunities to continue learning with Pendle Hill. You can learn more about our upcoming programs on our website as usual. There's a whole lot coming up, so we really recommend you check that out. There are a few ones I'd like to highlight. So on May 10th, we have the Quaker Coalition for Uprooting Racism, which is hosting an anti-racist power mapping workshop. That's online, 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern. You can find the Zoom link for that and register on our website. We also have Continuing Revolution. This is a queer liberation themed. The title is Queer Liberation and Spirit-Rooted Justice. This is a hybrid event aimed for young adults, ages 18 to 35 in the Quaker world. It's in person at Friend's Place in DC, and then also hybrid via Zoom. You can find registration info also on our website for that. One more. We have our faith-based reparative justice, a tool for racial healing conference on campus, July 10th through 13th. This is a conference of faith leaders and congregants hosting an in-depth conversation and intensive courses to learn about the multiple dimensions of reparations and reparative justice. We have a couple of online info sessions about that if you're interested, May 14th and May 20th. Thank you once again to everyone for being here tonight.
Can I jump in for 1 second? I know we're over time, but I just really appreciated, first of all, I'm so grateful to everyone, Lucas and Peterson, Dwight, so much gratitude. And particularly Dwight for mentioning, when you're talking about supporting the seed, inviting people into financial support of our community. It is part of our mission to provide these free events, and we're grateful to be able to do it. And something that's unique about Pendle Hill as a podcast is that we are also a physical location. There aren't many podcasts that you can come and visit and walk around, and we are really struggling to recover from this recent storm. And we have a matching grant going on right now that will literally allow us to plant the seeds of trees to recover from the 60 trees that we lost. So if you haven't yet gotten a chance to donate to the storm recovery or encourage your friends or others who you know who love Pendle Hill, this is a moment where we're really turning to our community to allow us to keep growing and sharing this work with you. So thank you, friends. Yeah, we'll take a breath together to close. Beautiful night, friends. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna trust you after birth.
Sure.